It says Studio Live.
It does, and with the red block around it, so you know that you are, in fact, live.
Yes. Here we go.
Well, welcome. It is August 21st, Friday, doing our live office hours here on LinkedIn and YouTube. Just here to take whatever questions that you guys have. We do prioritize the live questions from our Greek chorus. So if you've got a live question, go ahead and drop that into the chat. That is either, to the right, or below, depending on whether you're on desktop or mobile. Drop those questions in. You can always go to tractionlab.io and submit your question in advance. If you've got a little bit more to say than you want to put into a comment, you can do that. We've got 4 questions that were pre-submitted over the last week or so. Thank you for providing those. Oh, actually, a little bit more than a week or so, because we didn't do an office hours last Friday. So we've got some good questions that came in. All of them are anonymous. We don't give any information out. We don't collect any information from you. You don't have to put in your email address to ask a question. Literally anybody can ask a question, and the question ends up on the show. But before we get to that, Cameron, happy Friday. How are you?
Doing all right. Hanging in after startup happy hour, or not? It wasn't a startup happy hour. A summer Sacramento
Summer
startup
party.
Summer party, or there's a lot of S's in there. So,
and it was a party. The Urban Hive has never felt so poppin'. It's pretty good. It had pretty broad representation from the ecosystem. I also really liked the silent pitch competition. I thought that was a really fun way to do that, because we could still do the let's pit startups against each other, sudden death style, but we didn't have to have anybody on stage. So you can walk around, you can talk to people, you can spend more time with the ones that are interesting, less times with the ones that aren't, and you can meet friends, and you can do all that without having to actually sit there for formal programming, which is much better for somebody like me with the ADHD. So I thought that was a fun format. Obviously, it's going to be far less scientific in the outcome. It's all the biases and everything are going to be just baked into the nature of the format. So we kind of just got to accept that. But even with all that included, I kind of liked it. What'd you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I like it's kind of more natural of a pitch as well. Can you walk up and tell us about your business? And it's you don't have you technically have a one slide or maybe the visual, but it's not about what's on the slides, but just how well you know your business and being able to have a conversation around it.
Totally. And the a couple of companies in the Traction Lab cinematic universe did pretty well. So that's pretty awesome.
The cinematic universe, they're
it's
part of our performance.
Well, part of the Traction Lab theater. We gotta keep putting on new characters, new shows. There's always another Marvel movie to be had. There's always another Traction Lab program to be launched. Exactly. We've got quite the cinematic universe, beneath us. But no, they are. Our companies always represent. They did. So super happy to see that.
And we're just the superheroes that continue on, movie by movie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have our own superpowers and our own idiosyncrasies, we'll say, and our weaknesses that we just bring from film to film to film, staying relatively stable, throughout. That's actually one of the things that I like about television, right? Is you can see the long arc of a character. Right. So from show to show to show, or to season, you get these evolving characters, and they always end someplace different than they started. And there's been a very small number of shows that really subvert that in a way that I really enjoyed. And one of them was Justified, which I know you've seen, right?
Yeah.
So the fun part about Justified is that Raylan stays the same. From the first episode to the last episode, he is the same motherfucker throughout the whole thing. But the world changes around him, the bad guys change around him, everything changes around him. But he's the one who kind of stays stable, because it's got that old Western feel where you have this defined anti-hero hero character who plays their role, but everything else is kind of shifting, and so we get this good versus evil battle, and just kind of stays with that. So I like that subversion. So maybe we don't need our our own character arcs. Maybe we can be stable and this pillar of science to all the other things that are
Pillar of
changing
science.
around us.
Oh God, you had to bring in the science, huh?
I had to
Yeah.
just in case Arlene listens to this, because she and I got into a thing last night about the science. So
All
she's
right.
very much in team anti-science.
She's anti-science. All right.
Well, that's probably an uncharitable way to describe it, but she is not pro us being very forward about us using a scientific process.
Got it. Is that because it doesn't land well, or just it's less approachable, or what was the takeaway?
I wouldn't want to speak for her, but the impression that I walked away with was that it was less approachable, a little bit more boring, less interesting. It spoke to process and methodology as opposed to outcomes.
Hmm.
So
we're just rough and raw.
we're just rough
Raw
and
and raw.
raw. Maybe it was rough and real. I think maybe it was raw and real. Raw and real.
Raw.
Maybe. I don't know. It was two R's that she suggested for the startup bros to have for their podcast.
Well, maybe we'll try next week for our office hours here. We'll call it the Startup Bro Weekly AMA. So if you
Our reality check with the startup bros.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I don't know.
Amen.
That term has a lot of baggage. It's like one click away from tech bros, which is way too close for comfort. Because we're definitely not tech bros.
Are you wearing your Allbirds?
I am not wearing Allbirds. Thank you very much.
You just don't have shoes on. I understand.
I'm wearing Hoka's. Thank you very much. I've got Hoka's, and I'm. It doesn't matter. The point is, I'm not a tech bro. I don't do the crypto thing. I'm a little anti-crypto.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've filibustered enough here. No, I'm just kidding. It's a
we've kept
start.
We've kept it light.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think shall we hop in? I did warm up the chat. So if for all of you out there, if you do want to ask a live question, throw it in the comments and we'll be sure to answer it straight away. But I think with that, let's hop in. I know we have targeted about 12:30 is kind of our target to get these answered by. So with it, do you want to kick us off?
We'll kick it off. Get your questions in now, because Cameron just put a clock on this bitch. All right. Yeah. We only got 21 minutes left.
Set that timer.
Set that timer. All right, here we go. So the first question pre-submitted, let's see there. It's B2B SaaS targeting SMBs, kind of a broad customer definition there. They are at the early revenue stage, and they say, when should we hire our first salesperson? Right now, it's just me and my co-founder doing sales, and we're stretched thin, but I don't know if we can afford it or if it's too early.
All right. So I think like the first question I would follow up with is like, where are you stretched thin? And like, where would you feel like you should be allocating more time? And so, if it's something along the lines of it's taking longer to close these deals than otherwise, I feel like we maybe haven't fully unlocked our sales yet, right? And so we're kind of in that founder only to then like, at what point do we move into the founder led? And I think it's when we start to have a more predictable and repeatable process that we're looking to actually sell. And so I think if we're feeling stretched thin, it might not be as repeatable or predictable at this point. And so when we start to have that clarity on this is what our customer looks like, this is the value proposition that lands, this is from them getting into this conversation to deal closing is going to look like this. And so then you could easily account for that person to a degree coming in and starting to replicate that. Again, obviously you would need to help them initially as you'd want founder led sales, but kind of bridging that gap is where my mind goes. So it sounds a little bit too early. I don't have a ton of data though to fully speak to that, but I'd be curious of your thoughts, JDM.
Yeah, it's hard to really speak without more data here. But since you said that you're at the early revenue stages, the chances that you're ready to hire a salesperson are fairly low just as a baseline. So what we're looking for, as Cameron mentioned, is for you to be moving down what we call the founder arc, which is from founder only to founder led to founder less. And everything you do inside the company follows that same trajectory, but at different times. And the way that you know that you're able to move from founder only to founder led is when things become predictable. So when you have a really well-defined sales process that you know how to get in front of customers, you know what to say once you do, you know what objections come up, you know that the difference between the objections and just a value prop misalignment. And once all that becomes consistent, same customer, same channel, same value proposition, same pricing, etc., then once you have that, then you could hire somebody to do that work for you. But until you have that baseline of consistency and of predictability, to hire somebody else is to try to hire someone else to figure something out. And that's the job of a founder. An employee cannot figure these things out for you. So so I completely share Cameron's question about what you're trying to free up time to do. Because if you're in the early revenue, like what's more important than getting more sales? If you're trying to free up time to just focus on product, I would argue that's probably a misalignment there, subject to some asterisks. If you are trying to free up time to focus on fundraising, I would also kind of question that a little bit here as well. Not that you shouldn't be necessarily doing any fundraising, and a lot's going to depend on details that you didn't provide, but that time might be, all things being equal, better spent actually just getting more revenue, more sales coming in, more predictability.
Love it.
Cool. And if you do want to dive deeper into that and figure out how to get that to a point that it is predictable and repeatable, check out the Traction Lab Venture School. Apologies for the shameless plug, but that's all it is for. It's to help you find those early customers, early paying customers, and to figure out how to turn that into a repeatable engine of growth. It's one of our Traction Lab programs.
I love it. So I did throw in, sorry, I'm finding the Traction Lab podcast as well, but I did throw in the article around Founder Arc, and then throwing in the Founder Arc Traction Lab podcast.
Awesome.
So we did get a question that was both pre-submitted and shared. That
question did not get pre-submitted, so I'm not sure where that was submitted, but it was not submitted to our form.
Okay. Well, maybe we want to bring it up nonetheless?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I was just saying, if there's something that is broken or problematic somewhere, I would like to know where that is, because that did not show up in our list.
Okay. So I can read it here. So Sharon, thanks for joining us. Hi guys, thanks for doing this. Of course, we are here at your disposal. Your startup bros. No, I'm just kidding, just to piss JDM off. But thanks again for being here. So, and we would love to figure out maybe where you pre-submitted it, just to make sure something's not broken on our side, because we did get some that were sent in. So want to make sure. But you're starting your own marketing consultancy firm and curious about what common go-to-market challenges early stage companies struggle with, that marketing can help solve for. So maybe I'll tee it up, Jay Dooms. The first thing that comes to mind as you're kind of building a marketing consultancy or agency is one of the things we talk about with early stage founders. And again, I think for you, understanding who your core customer is the difference between go-to-market and marketing. And so we see those as kind of a fundamental different thing, whereas oftentimes early stage companies feel like they need marketing, but they don't truly have the data or knowns, what we call or evidence to say this is the repeatable path for us to ultimately market our business going forward. And so I know, JDM, this is something you speak to quite often, so I'd love for you to share a bit more, and then I'll find that article and put it into the chat.
Yeah, I don't really have anything new to say beyond what you said, so perhaps I'll just underline a couple of things. So typically, I'm going to personally be pretty averse to recommending working with any type of marketing consultancy in an early stage startup, because there are no knowns and everything has to be discovered. And when we can't say even who our customer actually is at the end of the day, or what value proposition is actually going to resonate them, or what problems that they actually have, or what is actual, how they actually want to buy something. Like there's so many things that we just don't know that, we're asking somebody outside the company who has more knowledge in marketing tactics and marketing strategy to start to take shots in the dark when we can't give them enough information for them to do their job well. And so that's just a recipe for nobody to end up happy at the end of that relationship. So I think it's something where the founders have to do a lot of that work internally. A couple of things that I'll like put onto that as well is like, if we have a defined set of experiments that we want to run, and like we as a founder have decided we want to test whether or not this particular message on this particular channel is going to resonate in front of this particular customer, so we want to know that, and we have the activatable resources to have somebody execute on that for us, to actually just design that one little well-defined, well boundaried campaign for us, then great. I think most founders wouldn't have necessarily the resources to do that, but if that's something that would be within that company's wheelhouse, great. I think something like that makes a lot of sense. But if they're trying to figure out how to do it or figure out who to target, if it's anything other than the mechanics of the tool, like the mechanics of actually getting that channel to have that message for that customer, then I think it's probably just a poor fit. The other thing I'd say is that once a company gets a little further along, and we go back to that founder arc thing, and we're starting to get to a point where we have some predictability, and we've run some small tests. We did a $500 test here, we did a $1,000 test there. Things are starting to look okay. Everything's kind of amateurish at this point, but we've got some early signs like, okay, this makes sense. Now we want to double down. It may make sense at that point to talk to, to talk to me who's an expert in marketing and say like, okay, so we want to double down on this now, and here's what that looks like. But the cautionary tale that I would have for founders is that that most people who work in that space are either used to working for small businesses, which a startup is not, and so that model doesn't work, or they're used to running much larger campaigns than the startup can likely afford, or that is worth that bet. And so that like it can be a tough fit. So you have to find a marketing consultant that actually understands those boundaries really well and can operate within those, which is a tall order. I've met them; they're out there, but it's not the norm.
All right. So I did throw into the chat. So Sharon, if you have some follow-up questions, feel free to ask away, or if you have some thoughts. We did throw in the go-to-market versus marketing traction thinking article that we have. So it's titled, "You Don't Have a Marketing Problem." So you have a go-to-market problem.
All right. Well, this next pre-submitted question, Cameron, has your name all over it. So I'll read it out, but you go first.
Okay.
Right. This is B2B SaaS for coaches. I don't have any more detail than that. They are at the unpaid pilot stage. And the question is, the feedback is all positive, but kind of lukewarm. Like people say it's nice, but nobody seems excited. Is that a sign we should keep going, or a sign the thing isn't compelling enough? Hard to tell if it's good actually means anything.
Keep on keeping on. That's all I got to say. No. The number one pitfall we see is the unpaid pilots. Ding, ding, ding. We should start like a tally. Pilots. It should be like just start a tally of unpaid pilots that we come across.
I think we should like etch into our desks like every time it happens. So there's
exactly. It's like another one. So thank you for letting me do that. But nonetheless, why JDM teed it up for me in particularly is one of the big things I always like to point out is the unpaid pilots are a big area of risk, and particularly is when we're at that stage. When we set it up in an unpaid pilot fashion, is we haven't tested the riskiest thing is willingness to pay. And so we are testing it as more of what we'd say is a feasibility test. So we're seeing if the thing works and maybe that it delivers the value. But again, we don't know if we're delivering value to the right person, and particularly if they're willing to pay for that value. And so there's great, it works. They say, yeah, this it seems like it's good, but the challenge is good enough for them to ultimately pay for it? We don't know because we haven't asked them yet, or we also gave it to them for free, and so the launch forward into saying, okay, now you have to pay for it is going to be quite challenging. And so, yes, hindsight's 2020 in the sense of like if we were to look back, maybe we could have oriented this to having it as a paid pilot, and we might have been able to streamline and understand if that's actually our target customer, and if not, then we could actually be doing that work that we're now probably going to be trying to figure out in the coming months. The last thing I would say is, even though it's set up as a feasibility test, the challenge that we run again is that if this isn't our customer, we're taking feedback around the features and the value that we're creating for someone that's not ultimately going to pay. And so it's like, let's optimize for someone who's not going to be our paying customer, seems like a losing scenario.
Yeah, I call that founder freeloader fit, because instead of
Founder
working toward
free.
like like product market fit or something like that, we're looking for
Mhm.
like, yeah, product freeloader fit. It's kind of where that's ending up, because you're building this product for a group of freeloaders. Like, so
Yeah.
like we're not optimizing for anybody who's going to pay. We're literally optimizing for the people who aren't going to pay us, and that's just, you know, we definitely don't win, for something like that. But I think my question here is what we mean by feedback.
Yeah.
Like, the feedback is all positive. The only thing that you listed here specifically was they say it's nice, they say it's good. And so if all we have is that verbal feedback, then we actually really don't have much of anything anyway. Are they using it? Are they getting value out of it? Is the economic buyer part of this? Are they the user of it as well? Or is that somebody completely different? Like, there's a lot that I'd want to kind of tease apart and break down and, kind of do that. But I agree with everything you said.
Hmm. That's a first.
Well, we've got time for just a couple more questions. I know Sharon asked a follow up in the chat, so we will definitely get to that one. We have a couple more pre-submitted questions, but if you want to ask a question live, we're getting down to the wire here. We're only gonna have a few more minutes left, so let's get those into the chat or over here. That's where it is for you, depending on where you're watching this. But throw those questions in. Happy to do it. If you want to submit your question in advance, you can go to tractionlab.io. There's a place there where you can do that. Here we go. What are some common mistakes that founders make in their sales pitches and positioning to customers? Whew, it's a big one. It's a really.
You want to take it first?
I mean, there's so much ground to cover here. I'll just grab one. I'll grab one thing off the pile, and then you can grab something else off the pile here too. In their sales pitches and positioning the customer, I think the like, I want to separate out the pitch and the positioning into kind of two different buckets of things, because in the traditional sales world, they're going to connect a lot together. In the early stage startup world, the positioning is much more fundamental than we wouldn't necessarily use that term, but the positioning is much more fundamental than the pitch itself. So I kind of want to separate those out, but I want to take the pitch first. So I think by far, if we just want to look at volume, the biggest mistake is to do a sales pitch before there's a pitch to be made.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, don't open your mouth till you know what the shot is, right? So trying to say like, all right, we need to figure out how to sell this. Let's get into a hard sell. Let's document objections and figure out how we overcome those objections before we'd answered the question about whether we should even be pitching to this person in the first place. And this is what we often see happen when a founder hires a sales role too soon, before we have that predictability that we're talking about in the marketing question, is that you're setting up that new hire to fail, because we can't give them the information they need to be successful. They're a talented sales professional. They know what they're doing, but we can't give them the information that they need to be successful. So they're going to go out and they're going to try to sell to the people that you're telling them to sell to. And they're going to put all their skills to work here. And unless you get lucky, it's probably not going to work, because you don't know who the customer is yet. And we don't have that information. We don't know what big problem it is for them. We don't know where it ranks on their priority list. We don't understand enough about the companies that we're working with. And so those sales are going to kind of fall through. They're going to fall flat. And then eventually you're going to fire the guy because he's not making any sales. And the problem was that person wasn't a founder. And so they weren't in the position to hear the things that a founder would hear, like, oh, if only the product was this other thing instead, or if only we were to position this completely differently in the marketplace. And that's not something that an employee can do. That's only something that a founder can do. So trying to go to the pitch too soon, I think, is probably the biggest mistake by volume that I would see. But once you're ready to move outside of that and you actually do have some predictable stuff, then I would argue that that might be a little bit different.
That was going to be like kind of under where I was going to go was similar in the sense of thinking of where are they in the like four steps to the epiphany. Are you like doing discovery work, or are you in the validation space, and do you actually know who you're targeting, and specifically what you're selling in the sense of the value prop or the outcome that you're ultimately trying to sell going forward. So I think you again, in terms of like the sales component, is we like think of the very like large sales team and trying to apply that at an early stage, and that's just not going to get you to where you need to go. It's more of that co-creation element of with your customers, and so you're actually like understanding and unearthing like, oh, here's that urgent severe problem. Okay, this is what we believe that solution is to look like based on the feature sets and the outcome they're going to be creating, versus you go build the thing and then you're like, all I have to do is just go brute force sales to try to get this to ultimately convert, and that's not likely to lead to success. And additionally, is like if you do make some sales, it might just be like could be through your connected network, and so it's some social obligation, and so you're not really finding a real path that's repeatable. They're just like, okay, I don't want to say no to you, so I'll buy your discounted thing just to be a good friend. But then when it comes to like optimizing, that's not actually who your customer is going forward. So but I think you hit it on the head for sure.
Since I separated out positioning, I'll pull one off the pile for that as well. So I think for me, again, if we just go by volume, really common positioning mistake is the better, faster, cheaper. So we see this all the time. It's like, oh, we're like this other thing, but we're better, we're faster, we're cheaper. Any variation of those things, and that's almost never enough to overcome switching costs. And so
We save them time.
we save them time, and time to do what? Like, what are they unlocking with that? Like, why is that valuable to them? And why is the time that they're spending one of their top priorities? Because we're trying to sell, again, because we're talking about highly scalable startups, we're talking about innovation. We're trying to solve important problems for customers, not important to the world necessarily, but important in their world. It's one of their top 1, 2, 3 problems in their domain. And better, faster, cheaper usually don't make that cut. They do on occasion, but they rarely do. And when they do, it's usually about what that actually unlocks for them. It's it's better and it's faster, and that gets them to what? That gets them to actually be able to use the tool when they're otherwise overwhelmed by all the things around them, where they save the money and they're able to put that money to something else. And having that strong understanding of the customer, being able to position that a little bit better, I think is a really strong thing. The other thing, because we're also talking about startups, is I would say that, and this is a really overused and really easy to overuse, but category definition and category creation are really important in this space as well. And that doesn't need to be these big, like, Uber level categories. But we do need to be like, we're not that's better, faster, cheaper. We're different. We're just different. And we do this for that customer. And that way, when that customer hears it, they're like, fuck yeah, bro. And they just kind of dive in to that. So I think that category definition, like finding that negative space, that underserved segment of the market, and saying, we're it for them. I think that's where, we see a lot of power.
We're it for them. There you go. So one last thing is also just knowing who you're selling to, and what I mean by that is that the actual economic buyer, or is this the like user of the thing you're building? So particularly if you're selling B2B or B2G or whatever it might be, sometimes the end user of what you're creating isn't the actual person that's responsible or has the authority to make that purchase, and so we have to understand how we position it and the value to both of those individuals, and how that process ultimately gets done is a key element. And so sometimes people just jump straight into like, oh, I'm going to sell to this person, and I see the value it'd have for them, but they might not have the ability to actually make that purchasing decision.
Well, I don't know about you, Cameron, but I'm having fun. We got a couple more questions in the kitty. Should we push past
Kitty in the
our
kitty.
soft
Where does
deadline
that
here?
come? Yeah, let's push through. Let's push through. Thanks for the questions. So Sharon, thanks for bringing the energy and the questions. So keeping us going here, and we'll bring the ones in the quote unquote kitty. But I need to look up where that comes from. So
Is that going to be your frivolous thought for
Are we
next week's
doing frivolous?
podcast? Or
Sure, let's do it.
um, all right. So while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and queue up the next question. So this is a marketplace. So we haven't had one of those in a few weeks. So thanks for that. Marketplace for consumers. You guys got to give us a little bit more to go on here when you give your customer definition. It's like really hard for us to like figure out where you're playing here. All right. But a marketplace for consumers. They said that they're live and pre-revenue. Classic chicken and egg. We have supply.
Is that for dinner? The chicken and egg, is that for dinner?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We have supply but no demand, or demand but no supply, depending on the day. Which side are you supposed to focus on first? Everyone gives different advice.
You're the marketplace guru.
I think guru is a little strong, but I dabble. So I will.
Are you the
will,
marketplace
Maven?
Maven, the market. Very good alliteration.
No, definitely not. But I dabble, so I will attempt to be interested. So so I want to like, this is going to sound a little bit technical, but it's really important to actually answer the question, because I can't give you the answer for no other reason. You didn't give me a lot to go on here, and even if you did, I probably still couldn't answer it for you. I might be able to give you advice, but you're going to get a lot of that, and it sounds like you're getting a lot of that. So let me tell you how I would go about answering the question, and maybe that'll be helpful. So first is what we're actually after when we're creating this marketplace and we're trying to get supply and demand, is we're trying to get to liquidity. That's the thing that we're actually trying to get to, is we're trying to get a transaction to happen on the marketplace. So the only reason to have supply is to meet demand. And the only reason to have to bring demand is because we have the supply to meet that demand. And so that's really obvious, I know, but that liquidity is really important, because what happens oftentimes, and you may be experiencing this a little bit here, is that you do this like broad-based recruitment. You try to get tons of supply, you try to get tons of demand. People pop on every so often, but no transactions are actually happening. And that's because there's no focus in here. And so you have these two giant circles that you're trying to recruit to, and there may be an overlap. Like if we look at the Venn diagram, there's this tiny little sliver of an overlap here, but at any one time, like literally any moment in time, what is the probability that the customers that are on either side of either one of those circles actually intersect in that Venn diagram at that moment in time when they need to? In other words, like if you think about the prototypical, internet marketplace, and take eBay, there's no point in, listing a memorabilia of a collector's card for something. I'm sure Cameron's got some, I don't know, Dragon Ball Z cards or something in his closet, but you have like this collector's item, and you're listing it. If there's nobody there to buy it, like nothing happens. And it does that, but it still may be the case that there are plenty of collectors on eBay looking for products that they want to collect. And there could be plenty of products like that collectors are listing for sale. But unless you get the actual overlap that somebody's looking for this particular thing at that particular moment, the transaction won't happen. And if the transaction doesn't happen, if you don't have that liquidity in the marketplace, nothing else matters. You won't get any transactions, and the whole thing will peter out and die. So what we're after here is that, like, the question to reframe what you're asking is like, you say, which side are we supposed to focus on? Wrong way to think about it. That's the second question. The first question is, what are the two groups of people where we know we can get liquidity with? Like, if we can get in front of a bunch of people who really want to buy a piece of memorabilia, but we can't get in front of people who are selling that memorabilia, that's not the right thing to focus on. Like, don't get those people in the marketplace. You're just setting yourselves up for disappointment because you can't give them what they want. So what is the segment where we think we can actually get both of those? And there are all kinds of other constraints that might come into the picture here. Like geography might be one. I'm just using like eBay as a marketplace example because you didn't give me, like, I don't know what your industry is, but like, does geography matter? Are you matching up service providers, and so they have to be here in order to come do the thing at your location? Then, like, okay, well, we're not going to go everywhere. We want, in order to start seeding the market here, we're going to start local. We're going to start in this particular geography where we know that there are services and that there are people who want to hire those providers. And the last thing I'll say on that before I move on to the actual question that you asked was that what we're really because the setup's important, so I can't actually answer the question, but like is that the whole point of any of this, the whole point of having the marketplace is to make a transaction that people already want to engage in more efficient. That's the whole point. That's all a marketplace does. So if you're trying to get people who don't really want to transact with each other to transact with each other, your platform can't solve that. So you're looking for people who already want to do business together, but for some reason they aren't able to get together or aren't able to get together on an efficient enough basis to make that transaction happen. So in other words, prior to Airbnb, and ignore Verbo for a second, but like prior to like Airbnb and the popularization of that, you could find short-term rentals, but you had to really hunt. You had to go through Craigslist. You had to go through the creepos and like talk with people and like figure out what's going on. And there was no standards reviews, there's like risk and parts, but the people already wanted to transact. They wanted to do it. And we just didn't have an efficient means of doing that. And like you can even set Airbnb apart from Verbo, which came first. Verbo has been around since the 90s, since the mid 90s. Like we can set apart those two because one of the things Airbnb did was lower that transaction cost, make that more efficient by giving lots of photos that you could go on and see everything and all of it looked like. Now, Verbo has all that now, but they didn't have that much when Airbnb actually launched because it was like photos were expensive in 1997 to put online. Like that just was like, it was hard to do. And so, but then as technology made that easier, Airbnb said, like, we can use that to our advantage to make this transaction far more efficient. And so that all that did was make it easier to engage in a transaction that people already wanted to transact in on Airbnb than on Verbo or Craigslist or anywhere else. So the question to you becomes like, what is that segment where we can find supply, we can find demand, they already want to transact with each other, but that transaction is really inefficient, either so inefficient that it rarely happens or so inefficient that it never happens. But boy, if we could introduce that efficiency there, these people would jump at each other. Like, what do those two things look like? That's where you want to start. That's the big picture question. Then when it comes to like what you actually asked, which is like, which side do you focus on, supply or demand? That question is, and yes, there's chicken and egg and so forth. There's lots of different strategies that you can use. One that I'll use that's probably the most common one, and it sounds like what you're focusing on here, is what we call side seeding. So like you seed one of the sides of the marketplace, side seeding. And so side seeding is where you put all of that, you put the initial effort into one side of the market to get them on there before you do the other side. The reason that's important is that oftentimes one side of the market is more time sensitive than the other. So I'll give you an example. Like if you go to eBay and you list your product for sale and it doesn't sell within 5 minutes, you're not pissed, right? You list the thing for a week, like you gave it the timeline. So if you can get the people to do that, then you buy yourself time to get the other side of the market in. Whereas if you do the reverse and you get people looking for a product that's not available on eBay and you get them to come to eBay, they don't see it, they're done, they're out, they're gone. And you can tell yourself this fancy story all the time that, oh, they'll come back and they'll keep checking. They won't. They came there, they didn't find what they're looking for, you're out of sight, out of mind. And so you already lost that. So that's why we can side seed. Same thing with like Airbnb. You can list your property for rental. And it's okay if somebody doesn't rent it right away. It's awesome if they do. And like your speed to transaction is actually a really important metric for marketplaces. But that's okay. But if I'm looking for a rental, like I'm staying in a Verbo next weekend, and so like when I went to look for that, if I didn't find one, I was out. I was done. I was gone because I was going there at this time and I needed to book it, right? So you can side seed the market to buy yourself time and to get around some of the tragedy that ensues when you bring in the wrong side of the market too soon. And so then the question for you would become like, is there a side that you can seed like that? And if so, what does that look like? And then you define the strategy in advance. And it's not we do one and then the other. It's that we're doing both, but we're not going to pull the trigger on the second one until we first seeded the one side. Otherwise, we're creating a group of really unhappy people. I know that was a really long answer to the question there, but like that's probably like a record on office hours. I think it took like 8 minutes to answer that, but yeah.
You are the marketplace maverick, that's for sure.
I'll take maverick.
Charge. You like that? All right, cool. Well, I don't have anything else to add. That was a great answer, but I do want to transition to one of the ones that was just submitted. So thanks for joining us, Kapil. So the question around, are there any preferred banks for tech startups when they are looking for invoice-based financing or invoice as collateral? Other ways we can put it is factoring is a kind of what they ultimately are doing, or invoice-based receivables, those types of things. But yes, so I connected in the chat, and Mask. So she's come and spoke to the Carlson Center on some of the factoring if you need that. So that would be a good resource. I don't know if banks do it. It's more of kind of an outside party that's likely to give you that working capital that you need. I think one of the like things just to think long term is you don't want that to become your business model. Because it then gets to be part of how you're actually like you're factoring in factoring the cost into your price versus it being an actual model of sustainability going forward. So think about that as a temporal solution, not one that's how you're going to run your business forever. So
Well said.
thank you. If you have a follow up, feel free to throw it in the chat. But I think we have one more question, and then we'll call it a
Well,
day.
I'll cue it up for you, Cameron, and then if anybody wants to get that last live question in, drop that into the chat while we're doing just like a 1 minute delay here. I'm fishing for the last question here, so but drop that in while we're answering this one, so that'll be basically the last question. So so hit us up there. All right, Cameron, this one is for you. This is they're not sure of the startup type. They are not sure of the target customer. Obviously, they're at the idea and pre-product stage. So it's a really early one. It's like idea stage. I like it. How do you pick between a few different ideas? I have like 3 I'm excited about and can't decide which to commit to. Scared of picking the wrong one and wasting a year. They're all in different spaces, so it's not like they're similar.
Come to the startup challenge, pitch one of the ideas, and form a team around that idea. Yahoo! Shameless plug. Come check out the startup challenge. But to answer your question, I think the first thing is don't waste a year. Don't set like once you pick an idea that I'm going to be doing it for a year. Like we want to go do the discovery process to see, one, is there a problem out there that has high urgency, high severity? And if we start to see that pattern that this early adopter type, we can actually get in front of them in a meaningful fashion. So like we can actually talk to them, and we call it like, is there actually like a path to distribution to be able to like get in front of them? Then it's like, okay, now how can we position some sort of solution and offering around it? And so again, if you have like these different ideas, you want to start with contextualizing who is your customer that you're ultimately envisioning using this. And then we want to do that discovery work where we actually go talk to them, see if there's a pain point out there. We want that to have high urgency, high severity. And if there is, then, let's give it some time and really bring that experimentation process to see if there's actually willingness to pay. But what we really don't want you to do is say, okay, I'm just going to like randomly pick one of these or use some big framework to pick one out, and then I'm going to spend a year trying to build it. We want to quickly get to evidence or lack thereof to say, actually, we went and talked to customers. They don't really have the problem that we thought they did, but we learned this, and maybe we pivot over here, or we say, let's ditch this idea and go back to the drawing board. So I think you can, maybe Josh might feel differently, but I think you can start by doing the discovery work on those 3 ideas. And if there's one that has higher signal, that being a pain point that has higher urgency and severity in a greater fashion, then that seems like one to maybe spend a bit more time going down that path. But overall, I wouldn't set to just say I'm going to spend a year on one idea without the evidence to back up that it warrants that amount of time. And again, what are you going to spend the year doing?
Could not agree more. If you're setting out to say how I'm going to spend the next year of my life, you're already baking in a conclusion. So we're begging the question in advance. And a couple of other things I'd say is, how do you like pick? Ideas are worthless. Ideas suck. There's no such thing as a good idea. So like pick the one. I agree with Cameron. Like you can do a little bit of parallel research, at least at the beginning. You could find like, where's there some signal here? Or what's worth what's worth a week of my time, and then bet a week of your time and like go through that process. Like, that's what we should be doing. It's not like, but as soon as possible, get out of your head. We have this metric that we use at the Traction Lab called time to customer, TTC. Cool. And time to customer is the amount of time it takes to go from idea to testing it in the market. So in other words, from hypothesis to evidence, like that's the timing. And you want to get that as narrow as possible. And eventually, when you're answering really big questions, that can take a couple of months sometimes. It's usually faster. It's usually on the order of weeks, but like it can still take a bit of time to get some good answers on that. In the early days, time to customer is hours, maybe a couple of days, maybe a week if you're doing like B2B or B2E where, there's email lag and all that. But like it's pretty short. And so like use that to your advantage. We're not picking this long-term direction. We're just saying, how can we go get more evidence? The other thing I want to say that's relevant, I spun my chair over to the shelf there to grab this book by Seth Godin called The Dip. I'm not going to get in focus as I'll have to cover my face with it. Yeah, The Dip by Seth Godin. It's a tiny little book, as is Seth Godin's wont. But it's the subtitle is A Little Book That Teaches You When to Quit and When to Stick. So pretty topical. But this graph here is actually the important part, because we have this story that we tell in startups of like, it's, the hockey stick graph. And it's like, nothing, woohoo, right? The J curve. But we all know that like, that doesn't usually happen. Like, that's not really the way it works. And so then we tell ourselves as a story that there's this dip that you start going on and, oh, now we have trough of sorrows, baby. Oh, boo. And then woohoo, and it takes off. But right, it's like, so they're like, oh, we have the dip, that's real. So now if I'm in this like startup space and I'm suffering and things kind of suck and everything is like, well, I just haven't gotten through the other side of the dip yet. I haven't gotten through the other side of the trough of sorrows. And if I just keep going, I'm in grit and persistence and stick-to-itiveness, I'm going to get to the other side. The problem is most of the time startups fail, which means there is no other side of the dip. There is only the dip. And the dip might even get deeper. Like there's a bottomless pit that might only end in unaliving. So like it's a dangerous thing to say like there is something on the other side of the dip, which means the skill is knowing when to enter the dip and when not to. That's the skill that we need to learn as founders. And Cameron described how with evidence and making small bets and getting it back. The good news is you are not making that choice yet. You're nowhere near the dip, right? You're just you're on a gentle stroll through the woods. And I say, fuck yeah, take a walk in the woods. Like go explore these ideas, have some fun with them and see where they take you. And when you get to a point where you're going to say like, there's a dip coming, I can see this dip coming, then ask the question, is it worth it? Do we have the evidence that there's there that it makes sense to enter the dip? That's the thing. It's not that winners never quit. Right? Like everybody says, oh, winners win because they never quit. Winners never quit. It's like, no, winners win because they quit everything else. And the skill is knowing which thing is going to be the winner so that you can pick that thing and you can quit everything else.
Perfect. One last quick saying we have is proportion your effort to the evidence you have. So when we think about spending a year on an idea, at this point we don't have enough evidence to warrant spending a year building a company around it just because it's an idea. We want to go gather that evidence to proportion us spending more time and building things around it. So I think the last question we sufficiently fished for another question.
They always come through.
They do. Thank you.
You guys always come through. We love the Greek chorus. So thanks for chiming in.
Awesome. And great seeing you last night. So here is your question. So what would you advise is the best way to incorporate your startup? I think this follows up on the last question once they are past the idea stage. So if the question is a matter of the type of entity, again, this is not legal advice, but a lot of it depends on the type of business that you're going to be building. So if you're building a highly scalable venture backable company and you're going to be raising equity funding or financing, they're going to want to invest in a C corporation. That's just how they want to do it. And it is for a variety of reasons, both from legal as well as tax implications and other things of that nature. And then outside of that, it kind of just depends on what type of venture you're building and what your goal for building that venture is. So I don't know if if you have anything to add or amend around that.
I mean, again, not legal advice, so don't construe any of the following as a legal advice. But I think you answered that part perfectly. So I'll just answer in case the question was different. I'll answer it from another side. Cool. So what's the best way to incorporate, like if you mean like literally how to do it, the every lawyer in my life would be angry with me if I didn't tell you to talk to a lawyer, and that's the best way to do it is by going through a lawyer. That having been said, in the really early days, it's probably, again, this is not legal advice, but it's probably not the most important thing to figure out. And there are, assuming that you make a few smart decisions, then there are lots of online platforms and resources to help you actually get the paperwork filed and make sure you're doing the right vesting structure for founder equity and things like that. And they'll just kind of do a lot of that for you. And I don't think that, like, again, this is not legal advice, but I don't think that's a bad option when you are a time strapped founder and like, where are we going to put our energy? You'll have a lawyer clean up anything later anyway, when that makes sense. But this is, again, like the dip, conversation, proportioning our effort to the evidence. Don't do that until it makes more sense, is kind of my thinking on that. Because like, if you have no revenue and doing no work for anybody, then like your risk surface like is probably pretty small, and like the rest doesn't really matter. You're not taking money, you're not raising money, you're not doing any work for anybody outside the company. The IP is worthless. Like, there's just not a lot to protect in the early stages. And so, and when that does become something that matters, then you're going to have a lawyer anyway. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, with
Awesome
that,
sauce.
I think we'll call it a day here. So thank you all for your engagement, your awesome questions, both live as well as pre-submitted. Just a quick note, if you do pre-submit, a little more meat on the bone helps us parse things out. But nonetheless, we do appreciate you keeping us going from week to week. But with that, two quick shout outs was, again, applications are live for the Traction Lab Investment Readiness Engine. So we're going to be rocking and rolling on that program here soon.
It's going to close out soon.
It's going to close out. No more, no mas.
Get those applications in. $100,000 on the table. So get those applications in.
Game on. And then lastly is if you're interested in the Traction Lab Venture School, so years worth of engaging the dynamic duo, the
startup bros.
There we go. That's easier to say, apparently. But yeah, if you want a year's worth of support as well as engaging in some of our framework sessions, be sure to plug on in. But with that, thank you all again, and we'll exit as we do with bye.
Bye.